as I was just mentioning, we're going to skip Meet Your Lane Mates today and talk to Lynne the whole time. And I just wanted to acknowledge I canceled Marathon Swim Stories on Tuesday. There's a lot of crazy stuff going on in our world right now, but in our country specifically. And last night, I needed to hear a word from Lynne before I talked to her, so I picked up Swimming in the Sink, and I just opened the book up, and the passage that jumped right out off the page was this one, and it seems so appropriate that I just want to read it before we get started talking to Lynne. It's on page 6, and it says, "My dad said that the color of one's skin is only a wrapping. It doesn't matter. Everyone is human. Everyone needs to be cared for." And that was just really beautiful, and it just was the thing I wanted to say first before saying thank you, Lynne, so much for being here with us today. As we all know Lynne from her books and her writing or speaking, and we've all probably been following her career for a long time, but I want to let Lynne tell us a little bit about herself, like we usually do. So my first question to people, I'm going to mute everyone first, and we'll come off mute towards the end and do a Q&A. If you do have questions that you want me to ask, put them in the Zoom chat so that I can read those if you don't want to read them yourself. And the only other thing I'll mention before we get going is that Lynne is offering all of us today what's called a virtual book plate. So if you email me, Shannon@intrepidwater.com, or PM me your email address, I'm going to collect all of those and send them along to Stephen and Lynne, and she'll be email you a virtual book plate that is assigned, maybe she could probably describe it better than I'm doing, assigned, it'll be basically a signed book. It'll be a sticker that you can stick in your book with a sign from Lynne. So be sure and send me an email or PM me your email address so I can collect those and send them along to Stephen and Lynne. And I'm going to now mute everybody and then take Lynne off mute. All right, Lynne is unmuted and everyone else is muted. So let's go ahead and have Lynne tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I actually started open water swimming when I was probably 5 years old. My parents wanted to make sure that my brother and sisters and I could swim, and so we grew up in New Hampshire and wound up spending time with my grandparents in Maine. And so there were places pretty much in Maine that we swam in, and I think my favorite place was Snow Pond. And I think that's why when I get to be older and started doing competitive swimming, that I enjoyed the competitive swimming, but when my coach Gambrel gave me the chance to swim in the open water off of Seal Beach, I just thought this would be so much fun. And that day when I was 14 years old changed my life, because I knew this is something that I want to do and someplace I want to be. So that's where my swimming really took off, and where I found that there's a lot more than going back and forth in a pool, like all of you.
So my recollection was that your first marathon swim was the Catalina Channel. Is that accurate?
Right. When I was 14 years old, I heard about a group of kids from Seal Beach that wanted to do Catalina. And so I talked to my coach, and he talked to their coach, and they agreed that it'd be okay if I trained with them. So they had been training for about a year. They'd been training pool swimming, but they hadn't done any open water swimming till then. And it turned out their coach had been a lifeguard, so he had a lot of sense about the conditions and where to train and what to do. And so I was able to come in and train with them for 6 weeks. And now I look at that and go, 6 weeks. But Gambrel had been, my coach had been a U.S. Olympic coach for 4 teams, and he really trained us in distance swimming. And it was such a breath of fresh air to be able to be out and swim one lap and go 5 miles and turn around and come back and know that you've done 10 miles versus how many times do you have to do that in the swimming pool? So I think maybe a lot of you felt the same way or feel the same way, that, you know, you can go as far as your arms will carry you, and there's something so special about that.
Yeah, can you speak a little bit more to that about like why you swim marathons?
I can speak to it because it's sort of my way of waking up every day if I'm near the water. It's a way for me to write. In fact, I just finished my 7th book, and a lot of what I was writing about and thinking about happened when I was swimming for 2 hours in the morning. And then I'd finish the swim and I'd run inside and get showered and throw my clothes on and sit in front of the computer and be able to continue what I was writing. And so it was, for this book, unlike Swimming in the Sink, that was such a tough book to write and a tough thing to go through. And I think a lot of those lessons were valuable, and that's why I wrote the book. But this new book is about joy and happiness and a lot about what we love. So I was waking up sometimes at 3 in the morning wanting to get up and go write. And so it's a whole different experience. And it's interesting when you write books, for me, each one is a different story and finds a different way of being told. So the swimming in the morning is a way for me to think and meditate and also stay healthy. I mean, if I don't swim for 2 or 3 days, I start to get grumbly. You know, things that didn't bother me as much start to make me grumble. And I think that I have a friend who is not a swimmer, but we stopped by to say hi to him, you know, at a distance, and he was just beaming. And I said, Charlie, what's going on? He goes, I just went swimming in the backyard swimming pool. And he was like grinning, and he had that glow in the pink cheeks. And I thought, yep, that's what the swimming does. That's what's so different than being a runner. You know, there's something else about being lifted or being buoyant that makes your spirit feel that way too, I think. I'm babbling on. I hope
No, you're doing fantastic. Yeah. How do you describe, one of the questions I like to try to understand, because I'm trying to capture it for myself as well, but how do you describe the feeling of completing a marathon swim?
You know, for me, a marathon swim is such a puzzle. You know, the things that I've done often have never been done before. So it takes, you know, sometimes the Bering Strait took 11 years to be able to figure it out and to get permission for it. So to me, that's like almost like climbing a mountain, and completing the swim is doing the summit. So there is a huge sense of satisfaction when I can complete a swim. And then the sense of, I've learned not to be just satisfied and happy at the end, which is great. But I also now realize that in life, I need to have something beyond whatever that big goal is. Because otherwise I get through it and I'm happy. And then I'm thinking, well, now what do I do? Instead of going up and then coming down or going across and landing, I think, okay, what will this step take me to? What will be the next step? And so for me, sometimes it's another swim, sometimes it's just another book, sometimes it's where I'm going to go speaking. So it's all those different things that I've learned that don't do the highs and then the lows. You know, just try to stay up there.
Yeah. Find yourself built like having this preset like events, or do you kind of let things unfold?
No, I have things in mind. Like before I swim the Bering Strait, I knew that I wanted to swim Lake Baikal because nobody had swum across Lake Baikal. And I thought that, you know, the swim across the Bering Strait was to open the border between US and Soviet Union. And it was a huge deal at that time, especially for that to happen. And so I thought, well, if that opens the door, how can I continue to keep that door open or encourage more openings? And so I thought maybe the Soviets will allow me to go to Siberia and swim across one of their most sacred lakes and use that as a connecting point. But I also had in the back of my mind, if that doesn't work, or if this could work, I would like to swim from Sakhalin Island to Kunashiri in the Kuril Islands. And I've been working on that for probably, after the Bering Strait, I worked on it for about 10 years. But I was really hoping that I could do that swim as a peace gesture between the Soviet Union and Japan and the United States. And never got the permission because the relationships just weren't strong enough at that point. And I don't know what's changed now, but at one point, you know, the Japanese were allowed to go to Sakhalin Island and to Kuril Island and visit their ancestors. And the islands there had been traditionally Japanese, but after World War II, the Soviets were able to have Sakhalin Island. So there was a lot of animosity about that. So I thought the swim could help, you know, change that. I don't know what the status is now. At some point, I just thought, okay, finally, there are other things that I'd like to do and other ways of doing swims.
That's amazing that you have that. The forethought, I love it. Do you, I have to just ask, because you mentioned puzzles, do you enjoy doing puzzles when you're not puzzling out your world?
I like puzzles, but I'm really not good at them. I think I like the mental puzzles instead, more of, you know, how do I do something that's never been done before? How do I get permission? How do I know where to train? Who do I get for a crew? What are the dangers in the area? How can I mitigate them as much as possible? There's a whole list that I'm constantly going through and adjusting because, as you know, one day a swim in a certain area can be perfect. And the next day, oh, there's a water moccasin. Not what I expected, you know? So I think that that's, again, you know, those surprises in not the greatest way, but also in the, oh my gosh, this morning I was swimming and I saw 2 cormorants fly by because they were nesting in the tree and you could see them feeding their babies and like, okay, this is really great. So I think that that's one of the things that is so special to what we do, is that, you know, we have surprises and we have things that we have to adjust to during the middle of the swim. Whereas in the pool, there's just, are you swimming fast enough? Are you pacing with somebody next to you? Is the water 76 or 78 degrees? You know, it's, I look though at the pool swimming time as a great time to connect with friends too. But also I look at it as a great way to establish your pace and to work at a certain level and to do stroke work. But really now in my life, I would much rather be in the open water. It's just, to me, so much more fun.
Awesome. You mentioned, you kind of alluded to like the adapting and changing. How have you, do you have any recommendations or suggestions on how to adapt to those changes that happen inevitably during an open water swim?
Interesting that you ask. I was just asked a young swimmer in Virginia what to do. She called me because it was her 16th birthday and I'd never met her before, and she was a swimmer out of water. And so I said, well, you know, is there anyone that you know in your neighborhood who has a swimming pool? And she said, actually, yes. And I said, well, what's the water temperature? She said, well, probably, I don't know, but maybe around 50 degrees. And I said, well, do you know somebody that has a wetsuit? And she said, oh, yeah, I do. I said, well, maybe you could talk to your neighbor and see if you could use your wetsuit and go swimming in the pool. She's like, wow, I hadn't thought of that. I'm like, well, that might work. But I said, the other thing is that, you know, when I was training to swim across Lake Titicaca, I went to Dillon Lake in Colorado, which is at altitude. I think it's something like 7,000 feet, maybe more. I can't remember. It's been a while ago. But I was intending to train there to acclimate to the altitude and to the cold so that I could go swim in Lake Titicaca. And when I got to Lake Dillon and I was there with a friend who had climbed Everest and was a pulmonary specialist, Brownie was there, he's a doctor, and he was monitoring me. And there was no place for me to swim. So he was able to get a hold of the people at Breckenridge and talk to them. And they allowed me to take the chair to the top of Breckenridge and put a stretch cord, tie it to a tree, and swim against the tree. So I was talking to this young woman from Virginia who probably thought it was nuts. And I was recounting this story to her and I said, maybe you can find a tree in your neighborhood, or maybe you could get some of your swimmers all together and you could attach. It's going to sound weird for people who are just coming in, but for you who can't swim, maybe you can do stretch cord together, social distancing apart, and stretch cord that way. And then when you get bored with that, maybe you can get out towels and put them down and do the stretch cord on your back. So she said that she was going to start doing that. But I also remembered that, there's so much resistance that you get from using stretch cord, and you can screw up your shoulders. And you can also be at a slightly different pitch than when you're swimming. So you have to start off really gradually and take your time doing it. But I think that adaptation for me for Lake Titicaca really helped me a lot. And I was able to, over 2 weeks of altitude in Colorado, train to go to Lake Titicaca in Bolivia at 12,500 feet. And even though I trained, I still remember getting in the water there and thinking, oh no, I can't breathe. This just wasn't what I expected at all. So the adjustment then was, I guess I'm going to have to swim a lot slower. And I'm going to be cold, but okay, cold or breathe. I think it's better to breathe. So I think we do those things though in our swimming, and I think those solutions are fun. I think that's what makes it entertaining. Yeah.
It's a good way to look at it. Requires some flexibility of mind, it seems.
Exactly. Yeah.
Do you think it's more of a personality that lends to the flexibility? I'm just kind of postulating here. The flexibility, yes. Is it like a personality, the personality type versus a regimented maybe kind of person?
Well, I think that open water swimmers, generally speaking, are really disciplined people. I mean, to be able to get up and go into the water, and most times in every place that we swim, the water's cold or chilly. So to be able to go, okay, I know that when I get in the water, it's going to be cold. But then to get through that and then start swimming and then start feeling good, I think that takes a huge amount of discipline. And I also think that just putting in the distance, I mean, to be able to entertain yourself, or if you're swimming with friends, be able to keep them laughing. One of my best friends who's now passed away, but was a man named David Udovan. And we used to train together as teenagers. And I just remember that as we were going through the surf, we would be just cracking jokes and laughing and sort of saying to each other, what are we doing here now? And then we'd watch the sunrise and think, this is why we were here. But I think that open water swimmers have this innate sense of amazing discipline, but also grace, that they love where they are, and they also have the ability to adjust. And those who don't really adjust wind up going back into the swimming pool or into a different sport. And when we were first talking this morning, we were talking about how many displaced pool swimmers there are right now and how they're winding up in the open water. And I was telling Shannon that you could just look over and you see these swimmers with their head down, absolutely unaware of everything that's going on around them because they're swimming laps. And I just think, oh my gosh, you need to swim with a pot of open water swimmers who know what's going on and can tell you to watch out for the jet ski that's coming near you. It's just, we have this heightened sense of awareness that a lot of people don't. And I think we also have that because we want to be exploring the water that we're in. But I think it's also part of safety and being aware of what's around us. And I think for me now, hate to bring it up, but with a virus, I'll be walking with my husband down the street and we'll see somebody probably 50 feet away. And I'll think, okay, it's time to cross the street and go to the other side. And my husband looks up and says, what? I'm like, we got to move to the other side. Just be really super careful for them and for us,
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad you brought it up, because that's a big part of why we're here now, is because the virus but it's brought us together in this new way that personally I'm enjoying a lot.
It's been really great. And actually I've had a few other Zoom sessions with people who have read my books. And it's been amazing because I get a chance at the end to hear from them and hear what's going on with them. And it makes it wonderful and interchange. I mean, just to know that your group is from Oregon and Massachusetts and New Hampshire and San Diego and I don't know where else, but and to see faces that I've seen on Facebook but haven't seen in real life until now, it's really cool.
Yeah, it's been an amazing journey, and we're just going to keep at it. But I guess I wanted to hear a little bit about. It sounds like, well, I'll let you speak to it. How has it been for you since the pandemic? Was there stay-at-home orders where you were at?
Actually, it's been fantastic. I mean, not being disconnected from the neighbors in a way or from my friends, but my husband and I travel, Steve and I travel pretty much 3 weeks a month for his work and for mine. And so we've been constantly just going for the last 5 years. We just met 5 years ago. And so I started writing this new book about a year ago. And over the last 2 months, I've been able to complete it. I mean, by having a routine and by waking up ready to write. And that this is unusual because, you know, Swimming in the Sink was a book that I started and it took 5 years to write. And basically I wrote the first version of it, threw it out, wrote another version and threw it out, and then started the third time and then wrote it because the subject had changed. And I thought what I had to say was really more important than what I initially started with. So with this new book, it was just a joy to get up and to write and to work on. So, and the other part of it is that my husband has been working on an opera for 17 years. He's been writing the libretto, the lyrics for it. And he has been working on it off and on, but never had the time to sit down and really focus. And so in the last 2 months, he's been able to complete it. And we did this really cool Zoom session with a group of his friends from the former CEO of the San Francisco Ballet to a friend that he sang with at Cornell and the Glee Club, and other people that he's known for all of his life to read through and evaluate the libretto. And so these Zoom sessions are so cool, but for him, you know, I said, look, you brought together all these friends from all these years to do something that you've been working on all this time, and they've helped you hear these different voices and be able to figure out how to go ahead and write it further. So this time for a lot of people is like counting the days, but we really have been doing something with them and making them count because it's still our life going by. And we're also really lucky because we have super cool neighbors who are starting to have garage dinners with us. And they will put out a table near the garage door from their house into the garage and order takeout, and they'll get it there at where they're sitting. And at the other end of the garage, they'll bring the takeout to us before we get there, and we'll sit down at the table. And we've listened to music and opera, and they wound up moving paintings into the garage so we could have some cultural background, and it's been actually fun. So I think it's really, you know, it's not what you don't have, it's what you make the most of what you have, and having friends and neighbors that are really special and entertaining. You know, these are the things that get us through stuff, I think.
Yeah, just like an open water swim, right?
Yeah,
Being
exactly.
creative, being creative and having a good crew.
Right, and that, you know, exactly, because it's, if you have a bad crew, I remember years ago, I got an email from a young woman who had just graduated from MIT or just about to, and she decided to swim the English Channel, and she decided to do it with not a whole lot of training. And she decided also to bring her mom and dad, who she knew in advance got seasick. So she wound up having a very difficult swim, and her parents were sick the entire way across and weren't able to support her at all. And I thought, you know, that just wouldn't have been the way I would have set up my swim. You know, I would have made sure in advance that my crew was there to support me and I wasn't worried about them the whole time. And I think that that is something that, you know, things happen and it's really good to help each other out. But when you're doing something that's so involved and so focused, it makes a difference who you have for your crew in the water and in life. You know, I think that as we go through this section of our lives, it makes a huge difference that we're all connected right now, you know, and figuring out how to adjust and adapt and make something interesting.
Yep, that's wonderful. You've obviously have a bunch of amazing swims on your resume, to say the least. Is there a swim that you're the most proud of?
You know, that's always a difficult question because people ask, you know, what swim did you like the best? You know, and the thing is that each one is different, and each one has taken, you know, sometimes a couple years, sometimes 11 years to be able to plan and do. So each swim has, in my heart, a special place. But I think the Bering Strait would be the swim that I'm the most proud of because it changed history. It opened the border between the US and Soviet Union. It allowed people to go back and forth between the islands in Siberia and the United States, the Inuit who lived there. It opened up fishing rights. They created an international park that exists there now. And as a result of that swim and the opening, it helped to bring down the wall between East and West Germany. And this wasn't something that I came up with. It came through different German swimmers that told me about this, that they saw the connection between the two things. So I think that the swim was incredibly physical and really swimming into the unknown as far as temperature and the human ability. But it was really all about how do we change a relationship with the Soviet Union and change the world in a positive way. And so, I mean, that's what kept me going for 11 years to try to get the permission to do it. So I think that that swim is really the one that I was really proud of. And then to have President Reagan and President Gorbachev, or General Secretary Gorbachev, sign the INF Missile Treaty after the swim, and for President or Secretary General Gorbachev to get up and sign the treaty, and have him start off and mention the swim and my doing it and how that helped to change their relationship between the two countries. It made me realize that, yeah, we're just all human, but in that humanness, we can do incredible things together. And it, you know, sometimes it's just one candle that's lit that lights many others. So I think that that was the swim that I look at it in my lifetime and go, wow, that was such a huge effort. But back to the crew, I had people who just thought I was out of my mind. You know, there's no way the Soviets are going to open the border. There's no way anyone could swim in 38-degree water. There's no way that you can have a crew that can go in walrus-skin boats with you and do it safely. And so, you know, there were very few people who really believed that was possible. But those who did really did believe. And those who went with me had the most amazing adventure. And they were people that I could count on, that, you know, I knew that I had a plan A and a plan B, but that if something went wrong, that they would have plan D, E, and F and beyond. In fact, you know, you may have read Swimming to Antarctica, but there was a wonderful journalist named Rich Roberts who wrote for the LA Times, and he had a background in sailing. And so he was the one that kept asking Pat Omiak, who is the captain for the boat that was next to me, the Umiak next to me, that walrus-skin boat, that, you know, what heading are you taking? Because we were heading off into the fog. And Rich could tell that the currents were carrying us to the north. And we were concerned that we were going to run out of island because the current was so strong that we'd wind up in the Chukchi Sea and I'd never touch the shores of Big Diomede. So it was Rich that kept asking Pat, hey, what direction are we on? And we kept making these great big corrections to the left, to the south. And I didn't find out afterwards. It was really this reporter who was supposed to be objective and not involved, but couldn't help himself, that he kept asking, hey, what course are we on now? And the thing was that they were using this compass that was huge. It was like this big, but it was probably 50 years old and it was all rusted out. And who knows how well it was really working. But we got to a place within a mile of the southern tip of Big Diamond. So we didn't overshoot the island and then had to parallel little Big Diamond to reach the shore where the Soviets were waiting for us.
Awesome. You commonly refer to our shared humanity. Where do you think that was instilled in you? How do you think you came to understand our shared humanity?
Wow, that's a great question. I think that, I think it was really my parents. My dad was a physician, and for him, I think that was a calling, that he wanted to make sure that people got well or stayed healthy as long as they could, and that's what he did. And then I think my mom, being an artist, was able to see the beauty in people, all kinds of people. And so I think that having those role models and seeing what they saw through their eyes, I was able to feel that connection as well. And I think that one of the reasons why I've traveled the world to do these different swims, it's not just about the swimming. It's really about going to Chile to find out what it's like in Punta Arenas and what people do there and how they live, and going to Istanbul, Turkey for those same reasons. And, I was just talking to a friend recently about writing, funny thing, and she was talking about history and how history repeats itself. The things in the world that are going on now continue to happen. And she studied intellectual history at UCLA. And I said, well, I agree that I was a history major, but I said, I agree, things seem to repeat themselves, but it's really not history that repeats itself, because you look at history and things change, ideas change through time, but it's human nature that stays the same. So that when you're reading Anna Karenina or War and Peace or something like that, the human emotions of love, happiness, fear, hate, all those things exist through time. And I think that those are those human connections that we feel when we're traveling around the world. And I think that the other thing is that when we're doing our different swims, wherever they may be in the world, in the United States, that we find local people that are excited about what we're doing and somehow participate. And in doing that, the swim becomes much more than ourselves. It becomes something really special. And that's one of the things that I've really enjoyed through this long career of open water swimming. Just being able to learn from local people and with their intelligence, be able to do something that nobody did or didn't think was possible and make it happen.
Amazing. I love that so much. Yeah, I will go on about how much I love it. But I was thinking, because I have 100 questions in my head. How do you, okay, sorry. Do you consider yourself an introvert or an extrovert?
I consider myself, I'm both. I like being solitary. I like thinking. I like waking up and going out and swimming and figuring out what my day is going to be and what I need to do today. I also like to think about if I'm having some kind of struggle in life, and what can I do that I can fix or change, or how can I be patient to see the change occur. So I think that is something that is really helpful to me. But I also really love to be around people, and I love to hear their stories. And because I think I learn so much more from them than I can from me. So that's one of the reasons why I've written all the books now, number 7, but I've written all these books because I've wanted to share these stories. One of my most favorite authors is a man named James Herriot. He wrote All Creatures Great and Small, All Creatures Wise and Wonderful, All Creatures, the Lord God Love Them All. That was it. And so he uses his background as a veterinarian to work in the Dales, which is really in Yorkshire area, and to be able to talk about the animals and the environment as much as the people there. And so I think that my writing has been a lot about that, of using the swims as a vehicle to be able to go into an area and meet people and talk about the experiences they have and how they connect to what I'm doing. And I love the way he writes. And I think he's just so down to earth and sensitive and kind. And I like those kind of books. Got off topic there, but
yeah, no, that's great. That's great. What advice would you have to an aspiring marathon swimmer, or maybe let's say, how about we'll go with this first, a pool swimmer who's trying to summon the courage to go into the open water?
I think that the best thing you can do is say, swim with my pod, or let's find a pod for you to swim in, because I think that there's a lot of great information that's handed down from one group to the other. There's sometimes not great information, but that rarely happens. I think that if you want somebody that's new in the sport to have people that will swim with them, that will explain how to swim safely, and to be with them so that they're visibly together with somebody else. And I think that also helps them overcome the fear. I mean, I still remember the day that I went swimming with that group of kids from Seal Beach, and, you know, going into the water, and Andy telling me, make sure to shuffle your feet. And I'm thinking, why? Well, if you don't, there are stingrays and you can step on one and it really hurts badly. So shuffle your feet. And I'm thinking, oh, okay. You know, and then Stacy saying, make sure when there's a wave coming to dive under the wave so you don't get pushed back to shore, but make sure your arms are out in front of you so you don't hit a sandbar and break your neck. Oh, okay, that's a good idea. So, you know, I think that, you know, people that are swimming in the open water know so much, and they probably don't even know how much they know. And I think that that's why it's so good to have an aspiring open water swimmer swim with a group.
Yep, that's good advice. Where's your favorite place to swim? Having swam all over the world, is there some place you just love swimming?
Right now, it's the bay in Long Beach, because that's, you know, sort of just outside my door. I wake up with the swimsuit and cap and goggles on and cross the sidewalk, across the beach, and get in the water. And so it's just been fantastic for me, because I don't have to drive anywhere, go anywhere. I just am here. And that's something new for me. Because again, we were traveling so much, it's just like, okay, is it going to be a hotel pool? Maybe I can do 300 laps today. Oh boy, that's going to be fun. It's going to be 80 degrees. Yeah. Not great, but at least it's water. Yeah, so it's nice to know that there's fresh water or salt water, right, brackish water right out front the door, right out in the front door area. But also, because I grew up in New England, I just love the Atlantic coast there, and I love the lakes. There's something special about swimming also in late fall, when the leaves are all different colors and the water is so calm, and there's steam rising off the lake, and the air is holding the sense of the forest around you, the pine trees and the leaves, and you just, you know, slide into that, and it's sort of like the summer's last hurrah before the fall and the winter, and you realize these are special days. I love swimming at that time of year in New England.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, I'm getting lots of nods.
Yeah. Yeah. Would you consider yourself a process or an outcome person?
Both.
Yeah.
I think that for me, it's finishing something is great, but the process for me is where you learn everything, and where you make mistakes, and where you think that something is going to work and it doesn't, and then you have to figure out something else. And you know, way back when I first started doing these swims, water bottles hadn't been invented. I mean, people just go, really? I mean, is that long ago? And I'm thinking, well, yeah, I was 14 years old and now I'm 63. So it's been a really long time. And so my mom was the one that came up with, you know, when you go to a diner, they have those bottles of ketchup, the squeeze bottles that are red, and there are yellow ones that are mustard. Why don't we use those to put hot fluids in, or warm fluids, and then you can use those for your swim. So that was like, okay, this will work. But the problem with those is many of those didn't have tops on them. So then she came up with, well, let's use shampoo bottles. the plastic shampoo bottles. Like, let's use those up and save those, and then we can use those as water bottles. And then eventually we found some place where you could buy little tiny plastic bottles that were about this big and this high, and they had little spouts on them that would fold down. So those became the water bottles that we used for the different swims. The only problem with those was that, you know, you go to drink and it scored out like a tiny little fountain, and it wouldn't, you know, you couldn't just take a gulp. So at that point, there were other bottles that were starting to come into play. But, you know, it's not always me solving stuff. It's, you know, people around me that have much better ideas.
Yeah. You kind of just triggered a memory from one of your books about, you know, approaching your parents and being like, well, I did the Catalina Channel. Can I go to the English Channel? And your parents being like, yeah, go ahead. Where do you think that they got their openness from?
I think that my folks really just wanted to encourage me and my older brother and two younger sisters. And my dad really felt that swimming is good for our health and is good for our health long term. So, you know, their first concern was to teach us to swim to make sure we were safe. So by the time all of us were 5 years old, we were swimmers, some better than others. But the thing was that they wanted us to be able to excel. And so, you know, my brother wound up swimming Catalina Channel and having the world record. And I swam it after him and had the record in the other direction. And then he swam the English Channel too. And then my two sisters wound up playing water polo on the U.S. water polo team for 12 years, I think. And then I managed the U.S. team. So it was something that didn't just happen. It was my folks really supported all of us and made a huge difference in our lives in terms of sports. But the other part was, hey, if you're not doing well in sports, if you can't do well in school, you can't do sports. You have to be able to do both. So I think that set us up for doing well in life.
Yeah. Another thing in your book you talk about right off the bat is your parents noticing that you were different, and then, you know, you kind of as a child even acknowledging that you were different. How do you think that empowered you in your life? Just this acknowledgement of being
different. I think that you know, I think they probably acknowledged they were both different too. You know, it's sort of like, I think that they saw that I had a special ability to do something extraordinary, and so they really supported it. But I think that all of us open water swimmers are different than mainstreamers. I mean, we just have a different sensibility, and I'm really generalizing, but I think that when things are tough, I think that we just think, okay, let's dig in and go, you know, or it's really choppy today. Okay, well then I'm going to learn how to swim differently today. Instead of going, I'm not going to swim, I'm going to figure out a new way to adjust to this and make the most of it and learn something. I mean, I think that some of my best workouts were probably about 6 miles from here, where I could swim down near the Huntington Beach Pier. Maybe it's 10 miles, but anyway, I could swim near the Huntington Beach Pier, and I'd be swimming toward the pier, but in that direction. But the current at a certain time would be so strong that I'd be going backwards. And so, you know, and the idea of just being able to make some headway, and really because I didn't want to have to walk a long way back. but having that experience in a workout really helped me when I was training off Nome, Alaska for the Bering Strait, where there were waves and wind and sand blowing, and it was hard to see and breathe, and I was going backwards at probably 2 or 2.5 knots. And I thought, okay, it's not Huntington Beach, that was only at a knot, you know, but and then at some point being able to just swim in place, you just go, okay, this is good, this worked. So part of my swimming, I think, is also, you know, what situation can I put myself in to learn something new that down the road I might use during a big swim, you know, and you know, how can I, if there's a current over here. I was just talking to a really good friend named Bill Wygant, who is the president of the South End Rowing Club, really super good guy. He was president of South End Rowing Club for many years. And he was talking about swimming off China Beach off of San Francisco, and how at a certain time, there'll be whirlpools there. And he was talking to me about, you know, he didn't want to seem like a wimp wearing flippers, but there were people in his group that were wearing flippers. And he thought of the flippers as being something for safety, because if things got really rough suddenly with the tidal change, that he didn't want to be sort of pulled out to sea, or he didn't want, if somebody in his group was having a problem, he wanted to be able to help them out. So my reaction was, who cares what people think about you wearing flippers or not wearing flippers? Flip it, you know, just put your flippers on and swim. And, you know, that mentality came to me just a couple days ago, because my husband and I were trying to walk along this area that's highly congested with people, and they're all out walking. And so, you know, you'd walk 10 feet in front of our house, and then there'd be a group standing there, and you're just like, no, this isn't working. So what we had started doing is just walking back and forth on the side street and waiting for people to go, and realizing it's not about having to go a certain course. It's really about going the distance right now. And so that's the thing that really helped me talk to Bill and say, it doesn't matter how you're swimming as long as you're swimming, and that you're doing it safely. So those, you know, swimming whirlpools, that's scary.
Yeah.
and because of that conversation, I said, you know, have you all thought of having a place to land that's a spot where you're gonna all make it to? And then if the tidal changes, do you have a B spot, and know in advance each morning there's a B spot and a C spot, and how to get to these different places if something goes wrong? And he said, well, you know, we haven't talked about that yet. And I said, I think that would be really a good thing to have, especially when you have this huge volume of water going in and out of the bay, and headlands where you have rocks and surf and all sorts of stuff. It's so important to have plans established. And I learned this from working with the Navy SEALs when I wrote the open water swimming manual. I mean, they were absolutely incredible. Just during their training session, they had boats, they had people, a list of names, they had people count off when they came in, they had an ambulance on the beach in case somebody got hurt, they had a backboard, they had smoke signals that they would shoot off if somebody was lost. And this was all during training, and I'm thinking, okay, I can learn from this and realize that training is still, you're still going into the water jungle. You still don't know what's going to happen out here, and you need to be aware and prepared and enjoy it. But you can't just daze out. You know, I've been reading a lot about dolphins lately, and I've discovered that when they're swimming along and breathing and sleeping, half of their brain goes to sleep, and the other half stays awake, and they switch off and on. So they're able to do both things to stay alert, so that they continue to be able to breathe at the surface, but also so that they're aware of the predators. So I'm thinking, okay, if dolphins do this, maybe I need to keep my brain switched on a little bit more and not completely meditate and go into a different world, you know?
Yeah, I know what you mean. You're bringing back memories of Lake Tahoe. I swam last year across Lake Tahoe, and it felt like I was sleep swimming. It's like kind of like half sleep swimming, but I digress.
No, there's nothing wrong with that if you have a crew around you that's watching you and you're aware of your temperature. But if it's really cold and you're not aware of your temperature and you're not aware of what's on around you, that's not a good thing.
Right, yeah.
Sounds like you knew.
Can you speak a little bit to, I've heard you talk about just kind of like, you know, having faith in some regard when you're setting off on these swims. Can you speak a little bit to that?
About having space?
Faith.
Yes. I think that that's what carries me through every big swim, that there is the possibility to reach the other side, that I believe in myself, but I also have a bigger belief that there's somebody over there watching over me. Just the other day, I mean, it sounds weird, but I'll just say it anyway. I was swimming 2 days ago offshore, and I'd been almost a 2-hour swim. And at the end of it, I rolled over on my back and looked up at the sky. And I was thinking about our friend who had passed away a couple of years ago. And I thought about her because she had been so welcoming to me, to this neighborhood. And just as I looked up, I saw a sundog, and I thought, oh my gosh, there's Shirley. You know, I feel like she's watching over me. And 2 days ago was when I get word too that the new book has been accepted. So I think for me, I look at signs, and I look at signs in nature, and signs with people, that if somebody keeps saying the same thing, different people say the same thing, you're going, okay, yeah, I guess this is the right thing to be doing right now. Or open up the other ear and listen too, because you might hear something that will help you get through whatever it is. So I think that comes back to faith, and faith in people, and in the environment, and for me, a higher being.
Lovely. I do want to open up to Q&A for people if they have questions, but before we do that, could you tell us a little bit about the virtual book plates, and how, and that if you guys need to send me your email addresses, but kind of explain what it is. I don't think I did a good job explaining what that is.
This was just a good idea that Stephen had. It wasn't my idea. He thought that it'd be great to be able to commemorate this gathering, and also be able to, for people that have books and want them signed, it's not possible to do that right now. So what he's done is he's created these stickers that I've been able to autograph and then attribute, so I can put to whatever the name, whoever the person is, and then sign it. And so he is able to scan these book plates and email them to whoever wants them. So they'll have your name or your friend's name or mom's name on it, and or whoever, and then my name signed underneath. And if there's any special thing that you want me to say, some people say, you know, could you just say, just keep swimming? I can do that. So I can put a special message within it and then put it in the book. And then I just did this for a really sweet group of young swimmers in Charleston who are all pool swimmers. And they were trying to get encouraged and excited about swimming in the river in Charleston. And so we talked for about an hour. And then at the end, the coach told me that, you know, they're not worried about sharks there. They're worried about alligators. I'm like, oh yeah, I would be too. I would make sure there's like 50,000 people watching the water, and making sure that they can get out now if there's a problem. So the point though was that I did book plates for all of them, and they were so happy, and they had read Grayson. So that was the book that was their connecting point. And actually I'm thinking that, you know, if you want these book plates, I'm so happy to send them, and write whatever you'd like. But I'm also thinking that if this is successful, this might be a way to do something for the new book, because authors now aren't able to do book tours. They aren't able to go to bookstores. They aren't able to do any of that stuff. So, you know, doing this Zoom with you is making me see that this is kind of cool, and maybe this is the way I'll be able to connect with maybe you guys again, and with people that are book readers, or swimmers or dog lovers, or whatever it is that connects them to the new story.
Yeah, lovely. So be sure, that's my last reminder, to send me your email address so I can send those along to Stephen and Lynne. Shannon at intrepidwater.com, or PM on Facebook works too. So send me your email address so that I can get those to Lynne. Do you want to take a minute to tell us about your book, Lynne, before we open it up to Q&A?
Well, right now, the title is Tales in the Water, and it's TALES in the water. So you'll know now, and nobody else, no other group has heard this, but it connects with swimming and the open water in some way. And I haven't gotten the editorial comments yet from the editor, so I don't know how much is going to be edited. I don't know if the title will stick. There are some elements about dogs in the water, so there have been discussions about, do I keep the tales in the water as tales as stories, or do I have it as TAILS? So I'm not sure. We thought, Steve and I talked about it over and over again. We thought it's more than just about dogs, it's about stories, so it should be tales. But when I say tales as in dog tales, people smile. So it'll be interesting. What I've learned from writing a book is that when a book is translated into different languages, the title of the book changes. So Grayson in Italian, and I don't know how to say it in Italian, but translated into English, was the magical encounter of the baby whale and the young girl. That was Grayson. The title changed. And then in England, they couldn't name the book Grayson because there was another book coming out at the same time about a transvestite named Grayson. And they were afraid that people would get confused between the transvestite and the whale. So the book there became The Day the Whale Came. So titles are so interesting and weird. And every title I've created first, though, is the one that stuck with the book. And so, you know, we'll see what happens. Long story, but anyway.
Well, I hope we get to, I'm super excited to find out more about the book when it comes out.
Thank you.
Very excited for you. So questions, Q&A. Nobody sent me anything in advance. Does someone want to come off mute? I have questions for Lynne.
But I just have to say, Lynne, I'm so excited to see you, obviously. I'm just such a huge fan of yours, and your early books, Swimming to Antarctica and Grayson, were so inspiring to me, and that's what got me into marathon swimming. I didn't know what a thing it was, but your books were just filled me with so much excitement and joy. I had to get into it, so thank you.
Oh, thank you. So now, where are you swimming and what are you doing?
Lynne, right now our pools are just starting to open. So I've done a couple of I've done a couple of pool swims, but mostly swimming at a nearby lake. And even that, you know, maybe just a couple of times a week.
And where's that?
Lincoln, Nebraska, and the lake that we swim in, it's called Branched Oak Lake. It's about a 25 minute drive from my house.
Oh, nice. And
yeah, it's not bad.
So do you swim early morning, afternoon?
This usually afternoon, late afternoon. In Nebraska, the water is now, it's really comfortable. It's about 68, but when we started swimming in late March, early April, you know, it was still in the high 50s at that point, which for me is really cold.
For me too. Yeah, that's very cool. How many people do you swim with?
I think Chris Rutford might still be on the line. Chris is a huge, he's the MIMS king, swims that, and a few others. So anywhere from 2 to 5 or 6.
Very cool. And when you finish swimming, do you go drink hot coffee or eat something together?
We would if we could, but it's just it's a state recreation park. There's really no place to go that's nearby for anything like that. So if somebody brings something, you know, that's nice, but there's no place to go really.
And we used to have hot thermoses of hot chocolate and stand there shivering and drinking hot chocolate together at the end of the swim. Or remember once being David Udeman's birthday, and we would swim together a lot. And so one day I made him a chocolate cake with chocolate frosting. And I said it was for him. He said, "Is it all for me?" And I said, "Yes." He sat down and ate the whole cake. And it's like one of my most favorite memories. And it was just like, I think we'd done a 10-mile swim on his birthday, or maybe 12 miles. It was a big day and a big swim, and he was hungry.
I love that. Any other questions for Lynne?
I have a quick question. Hi, Lynne. It's Louise. Hi, Shannon. Hi, everyone. It's so nice to see everybody.
Can I say thank you to Louise for giving us this connection to Lynne also? So thank you, Louise, very much for connecting me to Lynne so that we can
Oh my gosh, you're welcome. Well, the last time I saw Lynne was in New York City at the public library, and you were doing a book signing, and we drove, and it's so funny because I drove in, we drove in, Hugh and Jeannie and I, and had a wonderful time at your book signing. And then I got home and later found out I had shingles.
Oh no.
I was like, well, it started out really good, but anyway, I wanted to, and I popped in later. I just got off of a meeting. This is so much more enjoyable than the meeting I was in. So I apologize if I am repeating something you already discussed, but I really want to thank you, because one of your books that was really meaningful for me was Swimming in the Sink.
Oh.
And it was so sad at times and hard to read because I know you're such a naturally joyful person. But it's really, I've shared it a lot during this quarantine, people, because I think it's probably pretty powerful, the message that you communicate in the book about you find ways to kind of deal with that brokenheartedness piece
Yes.
that we're all in now. And so I really thank you. And that's the kind of the one book that I'm sharing a lot with people, swimmers that I meet, is Swimming in the Sink.
Oh, thank you very much. That book was the most difficult book that I've ever written, and I felt like I had something to say that other people in life may be going through similar situations. And at the time I wrote it, people didn't know about broken heart syndrome that well. And in fact, it wasn't the cardiologist that told me that that was probably my problem. It was my two other doctor friends who actually, Laura had gone on some of my swims, the one in Antarctica. And so I had total faith in them, and they were the ones that helped me figure it out. But I think that, back to this whole group of people all connected right here, right now, that we learn so much from each other and depend on each other, and we all become each other's support and figure out how to get through things. So I think it's so special that you've read the book, but that you found elements within it that can help other people. And thank you for doing that. Because I'll tell you, there are times where I write a paragraph and just start crying, and I'm like, oh man, this is just not fun. And I'm thinking, does anyone ever want to read this? And I thought, there'll be people in life that have hard times too. And they do. And so the idea was that maybe it could be helpful in some way. And I just saw somebody on Facebook talking about her elderly folks that are ill and how she had read in Swimming in the Sink that just holding somebody's hand can ease that pain. And that was my big discovery, that, and sometimes just metaphorically holding somebody's hand, but just also I know that physical contact, if you can have it, makes a huge amount of difference. But that book to me was solemn and challenging. But the new book that I just finished 2 days ago, and now have to do the editorial on it, is the joyful part of it. It's the sweet spot. It's the thing that the swimming to Antarctica, the grace, and it's that kind of sensibility. And I think my book agent and editor have said, this is the time for this book, that people need something happy and sweet and positive. And I'm thinking that's what I'm drawing myself to all the time, that, when things are really dark now, go toward the light, not up there, but just the sunshine. Go to the bright, go to the friends that are figuring out how to be happy, and figuring out what we can do with this time and make it special. You weren't here earlier on, but I was talking to this group, wonderful group, about how we were having garage dinners with our neighbors. And, in years to come, we'll be talking about how that's become a great time for us to talk and communicate. And if we hadn't been sort of grounded from our travels, we would never have had this time together. So I think that right now life is a little inconvenient, but it's not, it's challenging, but we've got the water. And I think that's what keeps us happy.
Well, thank you, Lynn. Even if it's Shannon doing her dishes in the sink.
Yeah. Did you have a question? Oh, go ahead.
I did have one comment. Excuse me. When you were doing your NPR interviews and so forth for Swimming in the Sink, I hadn't yet read it, and it was definitely on my list, to my beach parking lot with my son, who was going to spot me, and the sun was already gone down, and it was getting dark, and it was, May-ish, and the water was about 58, and I heard your voice. I was like, I know that voice. Oh my gosh, I know that voice. And you were talking about the book, and I was like, oh my gosh, Antarctica, holy cow, she can do cold water, I can do this. So it was a really big boost at a time when I kind of needed a boost to get in that lake and get ready to transition to do my miles in the colder water and at night. Because I had been in a pool up until that point that winter. I'm normally not a pool swimmer in the winters, but I had an opportunity, so there it was. And I was transitioning into the open water and trying to really push the envelope to build the miles in the lake, in the chill. and it really got me going. So thank you again for that.
Oh,
I managed to get in and swim the sun down and put in, I think, 2 or 3 miles that night. So
wow,
it was
that's
a big help.
amazing. So where's your swimming pool, outdoor pool?
Oh, I don't have an outdoor pool. My lake is Lake George.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And
Oh, yeah. Okay.
and when I got ready to do the lake, I was within days, and I had seen one of your talks about a different book you were working on, and I said I had a question for you, and you were so gracious to answer my question and wish me luck on my lake. So thank you for that too. So
Oh, that's cool.
boosting all over the place.
I love Lake George. When we were little kids,
It's beautiful.
we spent the summer in the Adirondacks and went to Lake
Yeah.
George, and it
Yeah.
is a beautiful place to swim. Yeah.
Oddly enough, I had never set foot in it until about 2011.
Wow.
So, and it's my lake now. So, so thank you so much, Lynn.
Sure. My pleasure. Nobody else wants to talk to me?
I do, because I like to talk.
There you go.
There you go. So I just wanted to say thank you. I'd seen you talk in New York many years ago, and somebody had asked a question about dirty water, and you had talked about the Nile and your experiences. And the thing I always remember when I hear your voice when you said, I swim for my health. And no matter how much time I had spent planning a swim, preparing, how much money, all that, at the end of the day, I will never jump in again if it's not healthy. And I think that was one of the great pieces of advice that, you know, there are days where you walk in and you're like, it's not healthy for me physically or mentally or whatever. And I always try to come back to that. And I just want to say thank you, because that is one of the things I always take with me, whether I'm swimming or crewing or observing.
That's so cool. And I'm so glad it's useful. I mean, we all learn from each other. We take these little bits and pieces of information, but I think that also came from experience besides the Nile River of, all right, the water in the ocean looks questionable today, but I need to put in the distance, and then I'll get a sinus infection and I'll be sick for a week. So what did that gain me? Nothing. So wait 2 days and then you can get in the third day, but don't push it if it's not right. And it makes a huge difference because we can do something else for a few days or find another place to swim. Yeah. Yeah. So where do you swim?
I swim in 2 different places. So I spend my winters in Charleston.
Oh.
And so, which is where I am now. And I'm leaving, and I spend my summer in New York. And sort of travel and swim in the Northeast. I'm retired.
That's really cool. So where you're swimming in Charleston, do you swim in the river there?
Not unless I have like a boat or a kayaker, because the tides here are pretty darn strong. So I live at the beach. So on occasion I swim at the beach. I train in a pool. We have a little tiny lake, which is what I used this winter, when we got quarantined, called Trophy Lake, which is about 500 yards long, but it doesn't have gators because they use it for water skiing.
That's an advantage, yeah.
And yesterday I drove 2 hours with a friend to a beautiful lake. It's a southernmost lake in South Carolina that doesn't have gators, so called Lake Murray, which had a lovely little swim there. So
I've heard it's beautiful. Do you have to worry at all about water moccasins?
No.
No.
I'm a New York City girl, so I haven't really seen them, and I'm not gonna think about it.
Okay, because I was visiting my friend in Oklahoma once, and we were swimming around Keystone Lake and near Tulsa. And he said, oh, we can't swim close to shore over there. And I'm like, why not? Well, that's where the cottonmouth hang out, water moccasins. Ooh. And I thought, okay, no problem.
Yeah.
I'm going over there.
I'm not doing, snakes and sharks, you know, we don't like to talk about them. They're there, maybe not. It's okay.
Yeah.
Weird swimming for me in the ocean here because there's so much sediment in the water, I literally can't see my hands. And so it's an odd thing having grown up in New York, and those waters, like, you can see a fish. The fish sees you and it goes away. here you touch the fish. I'm sure they're equally freaked out when they get touched as I am when I touch them.
So when that happens, do you scream and alert your friend who then screams too?
I did in the beginning, but now I'm a little better at it. So I was used to like touching jellyfish, right? And learning to just sort of go through them and not freak out. I'm still working on the fishy thing.
Yeah.
It's so weird to me to not see my hands when I'm swimming.
I was getting in the water a couple days ago and shuffling my feet because of stingrays, and still there was some little fish that was under my foot, and it was, you know, blackout, and I just like, oh
my God,
I didn't think I'd do that, but it just, oh my gosh, you don't expect it, and you lift your foot up fast and you dive and then go. Yeah. Wow.
Oh, I'll have to find out. You talked to Swim Charleston kids, right?
Yes, I did.
I'll have to talk to the coach.
Kathy something.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Really nice.
Super motivated, good kids, big readers, and you know, in this world, you don't often get thank yous from little kids, and they were all so sweet, and it made me go, you know, there's something about those kids, but I think also training and acknowledgement of support. And they asked great questions, and they were fun. They were great.
Cool.
More questions for Lynne?
I can ask, can I put somebody on the spot? Are we allowed to do that?
Sure.
But I'll do it in the most the most finessed way. We have some very talented, wonderful, engaging young people on this call. What is your advice or your sage wisdom, or what would you like to say to these extraordinary young women that are growing up and inspiring us and having so much fun in the process, Lynne?
I think that in open water swimming, we often look at the older person as the inspiration or the one that's knowledgeable. And I think that there's a lot of wisdom that's shared that way I remember to this day, there was a woman named Emma Trinkle, who was 93 years old, who used to swim in the bay out here. And then she would invite me in for tea, and I'd listen to her play piano. And she would tell me about swimming there in the bay for 20 or 30 years. And I would listen to her stories and learn about them from her. But I think that I also realized that our relationship was so strong because she'd listened to me too. You know, I was 14, 15, 16 years old, and it was all new for me and all exciting. And so I think there's also a flip side to this, where the young ones come in and infuse their enthusiasm into us and let us see things in a fresh way that we haven't seen before, or think about something that we hadn't thought about in that way. And suddenly, I mean, such a small thing, but somebody was talking about, and I never would have posted this on Facebook, but talked about how her boobs were all rubbed out and raw because of the sweatsuit she was wearing. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you're saying that on Facebook? But she was trying to find a solution for it because it was really cutting and hurting. And so there were 3 people right away around her age were saying, Desitin is something that works, or I do a combination of Vaseline and lanolin together that sticks really well. And I'm thinking, wow, this is great. People our youngers are experiencing stuff, and they're finding solution that helps the olders as well. So I think that goes back both ways, but I think the olders can help the youngers figure out how to do things more safely, maybe, because they've had that experience. And I'm not sure I answered your question very well, but.
No, you answered it beautifully.
Well, thanks. Let's talk some more.
I think to your point, Lynne, I would say, you know, like that, you know, Vera and Margaret and their, I think that's pretty sure that's who Louisa's alluding
to.
They inspire me all the time with
right.
what they're doing on a regular basis, and it's you know, and it keeps me going. But the same as what Lynne is doing and has done. So I love that. I love exactly what you said, Lynne, because it's both, and it's the sharing, and it's the openness, and it's, you know, it's this we're like this mind meld right here.
Yeah, and the other thing too is that the young ones help inspire you, but also they listen because they want to learn something. And then the olders feel really good because they feel like they're giving their gift of what they've learned. And so there's this giving back and forth that makes you feel like, all right, we're solo swimmers. We're doing these big long swims on our own. But in reality, I think in many ways we're connected more tightly than people that are swimming in a pool, you know, because there's the element of risk. No matter how you say it, there is an element of risk and of challenge and of uncertainty and unknown. And I think it takes a certain temperament to be able to explore unknown waters and share that adventure and discover new things like swimming and hitting fish while you're swimming. And not freaking out and not making your friend freak out either.
I just wanted to say, both me and Mara, and I chose like opinion. We both feel extremely lucky just to have like the connections with everyone here and in the open water community, just because we know that we're a young group. And anyway, we just feel very lucky in order to have the support and stuff like that. And like if we have questions, we know we can reach out and have them answered or have like, some advice for them. Because we really most of the time.
Did you get that, Shannon?
We got little bits and pieces. Unfortunately, Margaret and Vera, your connection there at Lake Memphremagog is a little bit slow, I think. But I
now we know the only thing that will slow down Margaret and Vera is low bandwidth.
Yes, but I think I heard her saying that they're glad to be a part of our community.
Yeah,
and maybe if you want to type something.
I think it's great that it's wonderful to have you part of the community, and there really is that. I mean, and I think that, I mean, you inspire the olders and bring that brightness that youth brings that makes swimming even more fun, you know?
Yep.
I have a question. Excuse me. It's a excuse me. So I was really interested in the way that in your mention of the stretch cords, because I'm training for a swim that I'm not going to get enough distance in that I usually get before this swim. It's just 5 miles. It's not in your league, but I want to get more distance in, but there's no pool available yet. And we've started doing some open water. The thing is, though, it's not going to be like, you know, usually I get to 10,000 yards. So I heard you mention stretch cords, and I wanted to know what kind of resources you can suggest about that. You know, what are some good workouts that I might look into to work on the endurance and technique and so forth.
I think that for a lot of my swims, stretch cords hadn't been invented. We used what were called extra genies. I don't know if you remember those. They were these devices that had a rope that went through it, and you could adjust the tension, and then you would attach it to something like a door jamb or a chain link fence. You tie it off, and then you would imitate the stroke motions, and you would also lay on your back and do the backstroke pull like that. Well, thankfully the stretch cords are here now, and honestly I haven't used them for years, but I know that resistance training helped a lot and helped me be a lot stronger for Lake Titicaca. So I think that it might be really good to be able to integrate that into your workout. I think at the most, I was using it maybe an hour to an hour and a half a day, because for me it was boring. But I was but I was able to look at it as, okay, let me figure out how to do 100 strokes and then take a rest, as if I'm swimming 100 yard freestyle. So do 10 sets of 100 and then stop. And I know people that use the stretch cords and use different resistances on it, but I would start off with the extra genie and the stretch cord at a very low rating, and then like you work up with weights, I would do light and then a little bit more moderate. But for these swims, I don't think you need to do lots of tension, because I think you can screw your shoulders up that way. And
Gotcha.
yeah, so maybe you're going to count your strokes on using a stretch cord. I would also see if you know somebody who knows somebody that's a physical therapist, because they also have these resistant bands that you can pull and use. And so those are amazing in helping you build upper body strength. And I guess you could do stuff with legs. I don't know. I've never used them, but I've done the upper body work with them before. And that's been great. But I also think that, we're used to being outside and in nature. And if you're going to have to do the stretch cord thing, if there's a way you can find a tree that you can attach yourself to and be outside and see the birds flying by and somebody walking the dog in the dog park or something, it makes it so much more enjoyable than lying down on the floor in your kitchen or wherever.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because, I was so happy when I got back into the river to swim with my group. It's a smallish, discreet little group, because we're not really we're still in the red phase until Saturday. But we were just to swim, just to have the feel of swimming, and realizing that, like the other day, I got to about 3,000, 3,500 meters, and I was, I'm not really as out of shape as I thought, which was very reassuring to remember.
It is really reassuring that you can jump in and swim, and it doesn't take as long as you think it will be to be back to where you were before. You'll probably have the endurance. You might not quite have the speed, but you can get that back. That's very
and just being in the river, just being and hearing the water around me, that was just magic.
Yeah.
So thank you very much. This was wonderful. I went to your talk at the New York Public Library and loved it. I saw Louise there. I'm so glad to have this chance again. So I really appreciate your coming on and sharing your thoughts with us.
Thank you, and it's really wonderful to see you in real life again and to see everyone on the screen. It's very, very fun. Thank you.
Coming up on an hour and a half. Go ahead, Jocelyn.
Okay, so Lynn, I just want to say I'm a fellow gaucho, and and I know Laura and Ruth, who's now River, right?
Yes.
From playing water polo.
Wow. So were you on the U.S. team too?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. So was Sandy Nita your coach?
Yes. Yeah. So I know Dion and Mo and Lynn and Marla and all that group too.
That's so cool. I was just in Australia because I was supposed to go and sneak on board a cruise ship and get to Australia, and the whole thing, surprisingly, was canceled. But that was fine because I was actually able to see Mo, and she's and wound up talking to her swimming water polo players and got to see her. And then Dion, I was her roommate in college. So these worlds, once again, all
interconnect. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I want to give you a virtual blue marble.
Oh, thank you.
There it is. Can't quite do it. Anyway, so, and if you didn't get your book yet, Lynn, I will send you one because I have copies of his book, of Blue Mind.
Oh, that would be fantastic. Maybe you could just email me and I'll just shoot you my email address.
Okay.
Or my mailing.
Okay, or I'll get it through Shannon or something.
That would be great. That would be great.
Super.
Thank you. So where are you swimming now?
So I live near Shannon in
One
southern
of my
Oregon,
three.
actually. Yeah, so actually I'm going off to Emigrant Lake, which is just our local lake. So we've been able to get back in since May 1st.
Wow.
So we've been in the water for a while now, and actually either tonight or tomorrow we're going to do a full moon swim.
Oh, fun.
Shannon, are you coming?
That'll be great. Actually, you know what I was just thinking as you're saying that, that's pretty early to get into a lake in May in Oregon. And then I was thinking, you know, there might be a lot of swimmers that are deciding they want to stay in through fall and try to get in through winter. And
Yeah.
one of the things that I learned from Bill Wygant, who was the South End Rowing Club president for years, he basically said, if you ride the temperature down, you can stay in it. If you stay in pretty much every day, you can do it. But it's when you miss a week or something like that that makes it really hard to ride the temperature down.
Yeah. Well, Shannon, so the last 2 winters in Oregon in the same lake, Shannon and I have been going, and so Shannon's been really the one wanting to see what she can do in cold water and getting ready for Loch Ness. And so I was like, okay, I'll go with you.
And I couldn't have done it without you, Jocelyn.
Yeah, so we
Amazing.
were swimming all winter long in Emigrant Lake. Yeah.
That is so cool.
And South End Club is so beautiful. My sister used to swim with South End, and it's such a great club.
They're wild.
So,
all right, you guys, we're coming up on 7 o'clock Pacific time. It's been an amazing morning, and I know I could take all of Lynne's time and talk to her forever, but we'll let us all go about our day. Don't forget to send me your email address so we can get our virtual book signing. And maybe, Lynne, maybe you could come back and tell us about your book once we know more. That would be awesome.
I would love to do that. A book will take anywhere from 9 months to 2 years to get it published. So
we'll still be here.
And so, you know, it'll take what it takes. But on the other side of it, the good thing is that I'm really lucky the book isn't published right now, because it's extremely difficult to have people know about it, and authors are really struggling. So I'm thinking, sorry for the other authors, but they're going to be figuring out stuff that will help me later on. But I think, you know, being able to Zoom with you and other people who read books, this may be the way to do it. And it's really cool because we get to see all each other together. It's been really great. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.